All right, folks, today I have a guest, Da'Mon Stith, who reached out to me after I made the video about Haitian machete fencing to offer some more information about it. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We deal with martial fighting systems that have died out, but we also deal with living traditions that are kind of struggling to survive. So,
Yeah, you've done a lot of interesting work on Egyptian martial arts, for example, the use of the khopesh and the shotel in parts of Africa. And that's really interesting because nobody really covers that. At least I haven't seen anyone else tackle these weapons. So I imagine it can't be easy with the lack of in-depth sources, right?
Yeah, it is difficult. There are certain difficulties. And I have to, I guess, be comfortable with not really ever knowing for certain, but making the best out of the material that we have available. Egypt is one of those areas that it has a wealth of information, both like as far as iconography goes and material culture, to kind of get a good idea of how things were used, or at least like exploration or reconstruction. But again, you can never be too certain, and at any point in time, new information could surface to completely devastate what I thought or theories I had before in the past. So.
Oh yeah, that's always part of the process. I mean, in HAMA, it's the same thing. Sometimes you come up with either additional sources or a new interpretation that, as you keep testing it, you find out, hey, this actually works a lot better. And even then, we never know 100%. Just because something works doesn't mean that's exactly how they did it. It's just one of many possibilities. Now, in case of Haitian machete fencing, there is probably more of a continuous tradition, I'm assuming?
Yes. Yeah. So there are, in Haiti, there are a number of different machete and stick styles that are practiced on the island. One of the most popular ones is the Haitian Machete from the Avril family in Jacmel in Haiti.
That's what I call it.
Yeah. So, and that style is really unique amongst the interpretations of stick and blade on the island. Its emphasis on defense and the way the attacks are given are really different than what you notice from other parts of the island.
What I commented on the use of the flat, that was actually something that I just took at face value, so to speak, even though that's just for practice, as you pointed out to me.
Yeah. So my instructor and the person that introduced me to the Avril family of Haitian Machete, Mike Dillon, he's the guy that has the YouTube channel, and he's done a lot of work to bring Haitian Machete, the Avril family system, out to the public, to the world. One of the things that he told me is that the professor said that the flat was used for friends and the edge was for your enemies. And so in training, you'll see this kind of tendency is in other forms in other African bladed forms, like in Tuareg sword fighting, and even like amongst the Beja people in Sudan, when they're doing like playful sparring or friendly sparring with the live weapons, you'll see that the blade is turned to the flat is turned, and they're kind of using that more so to make contact or implied contact as opposed to the edge. And I think it's just kind of a normal way to play around with the weapon, but not really expose your partner to the danger, as much danger.
Yeah, that's one of those drawbacks of looking at something as an outsider. I like to do it every now and then to just approach something with a different perspective and expose viewers to something they may not have seen before. And I also just find it interesting myself to take a look at things that I'm not as familiar with and to open a dialogue, which is why we're having this conversation right now. But the issue with that is, of course, sometimes you're misinterpreting what's going on. In this case specifically, in HAMA, the default assumption is whatever you're doing, it's translates pretty much one-to-one to real-life combat. That's assuming full gear and everything, and practice weapons and this and that and the other, which other martial arts may not be using. So it makes perfect sense to use the flat instead of the edge against a training partner, because you don't want to risk any injury to them.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always mentioned, or just kind of looking at how arts distinguish themselves from culture to culture, and one remarkable thing about African martial arts that I think that sets it aside from other systems, from other cultures, it's not so much in the technique, the techniques. It's more so in how the art functions within the society. So a lot of times you have these systems that people train for combat or preparation for combat, but they also serve like these multi-tiered function within their societies. So it could be something as simple as a way to like celebrate certain rituals or certain seasons or certain age markers. It could be for entertainment as well as for training. It could be a way for people to kind of demonstrate their skill and their courage through practicing these martial arts and these combat sports. And it's not so much the techniques that make it very different, but more so how the system kind of functions within the society to celebrate things or to recognize things or even to reenact certain things. You see that common in the diaspora as well, even though it may be blended or done in a different way.
Right. The Zulu stick fighting I commented on at the start of the video was apparently a part of wedding celebrations. So that is also an example of that. Important to keep in mind, particularly since I also keep seeing others who look at practice from other cultures and just take it one-to-one at face value and comment on it like this is exactly what it's like, without recognizing that there is probably an element of culture and tradition behind it, and also the multifunctionality, so to speak, because I've seen examples of the practice which seem to focus a lot more on the exercise aspect. I was also looking at Indian Kalari Payatu to also comment on, which I didn't include in that video because it would have been too long. But a lot of the practice seems to be geared mainly toward physical conditioning. So the exchanges are not like sparring, they are not an approximation of combat, but they're a way to practice and improve yourself, improve your fitness, etc.
Exactly, and I think that what really throws people off, especially with the real system of Haitian Machete, is like interpreting like what's going on between the two practitioners. So I get this a lot, right? And if you watch enough of it, you'll see like the person there's someone that's actively, like what they say, giving shots, right? You'll see. So one person is giving strikes to another person, and you'll notice sometimes the attacker is almost, and I know that you mentioned this about when the professor was moving with Mike, he was very like relaxed, very calm, very just kind of lackadaisical about the fact that he's, wielding this blade at this other person. And so the attackers tend to try to simulate chaos, if you will, with their movement. So they'll do some things that, like, if we were really sparring or if they were really dueling, because the machete is an actively used tool for disputes in certain parts of Latin America and the Caribbean. And so you can watch machete fights unfold in real time, and people with the intent of trying to hit or cut each other with these. And I mean, it's not, I don't glorify that kind of stuff, but it is for our study, it is very interesting to see what that looks like as it unfolds in real time. But to keep in mind that the person who's attacking, the emphasis is not really on the attacker. I've done a few videos with Haitian Machete, and then I usually get a comment of like, yeah, but don't turn your back on your opponent, or don't do the spinning move. And really my job as the attacker is just to try to force the defender to move. That's my job. I'm really forcing them to move. I'm really trying to find unique ways to kind of get past their defense. So I can do whatever. It doesn't really matter. This is not how I would approach fighting this person. Um, I'm just trying to make sure I give them the energy that they're have the energy of them having to always be behind their blade and always, closing and trying to shut down that arm whenever they can.
There is definite value in doing this attacker defender role that forces you to work on your defense. Some people are great at offense, and in fact they do it to a fault where as soon as the opponent does anything, they cut immediately. They try to displace the opponent's attack while striking themselves, which doesn't always work. Sometimes it exposes them, or it leads to a double, which is the worst possible outcome. And it can be good to really deliberately say, all right, I'm going to do nothing but defend now, particularly with a short, light weapon like a machete where you're closer to one another and it moves really fast. You really can't afford to take a hit in any way.
Yeah. So one thing, coming from a different system, what my 52 blocks instructor and brother would say, shout out to Light Burley in New York, when talking about 52 blocks, he would say that the focus is on defense because it gives you the confidence and state of mind to pick your moments for attack. Looking at the traditions that these bladed arts and even these striking arts come from, the theories that make the most sense tend to point towards Central African warrior traditions as being the root of what we see in the diaspora. And there was a heavy emphasis on defensive action, whether that's voiding, whether that's moving the body in a very dynamic way it goes back to basically to voiding attacks. This all can be traced back to some of the ritual dances and the training that was done in Central Africa, like the Ngolo dance and the Nsenga dance from Central Africa, all emphasizing defensive movement, footwork, dynamic displacement of the body. You see this type of footwork practice in capoeira. You see a similar type of footwork and a similar idea expressed in tire machete, in Colombian machete as well. You see this emphasis on moving the body and not just in a very dynamic way.
Yeah, that's what I found striking, no pun intended, about tire machete, the emphasis on defense, and which is why I just assume that this is a general practice in machete fencing. But since this is just one style of one family, what are some of the tendencies in other forms of Haitian machete fencing?
That's a great question. What I've observed is the techniques tend to be a lot longer. The attacks are more these continuous slashing motions. More fluid strikes. Terrible with French. I don't want to butcher it. But there is a region in Haiti, and I'm going to give it a try. If you guys are French speakers or from the area, please forgive me. Les Artis Bonites, I believe, is an area in Haiti where they fight with the stick as a surrogate for the machete. And they use more of these like sweeping saber type movements. They also have some really interesting like guards and positions where it's hard to see me here, but they'll use like these kind of shimmering movements with the while you're holding the stick or the machete will kind of shimmer, or they'll do like these circular motions where they're kind of like creating kind of like a rhythm, like an anticipation of a rhythm, and then they break out of that. So it's really interesting in that aspect, in that it's played longer, and there are more of these feints and what we would say like in capoeira or in Colombian machete, like malicia, as far as like treachery from long range, like trying to get someone to make a mistake or to, cover a certain area, then you go somewhere else. And it's like that idea is another very big component of African martial arts, especially coming from the Central Africa via the diaspora, is this idea of, I'm using the term malicia for trickery or deception in movement. You see it big time in capoeira. It's a big thing in capoeira. It's also a big thing in Colombian machete of, implying like a larger movement, but then being able to like change direction and do a smaller cut. Um, and then in other forms of Haitian machete, you see a similar idea of these. They use these big sweeping movements, but then there's also trickier movements that come from that are used as well to, create this expectation and then break this expectation.
In sparring, like sometimes you do like this little twitch to try to get the opponent to raise up the guard, and then you do something else, or you start the cut and then you change it into something else. What you mentioned is very interesting, this creating a rhythm and then deviating from it. So you make the opponent expect something and then you change it up.
Yeah, most definitely. And, speaking, since we're talking about feinting, I wanted to kind of like shoot over to real quickly, over to the Zulu or Nguni stick fighting video. So the video that you were commenting on by Siobanga, I believe is his name. To me, they have some of the best Zulu stick fighting or Nguni stick fighting that I've seen. If you check out Burton Richardson, who's a famous JKD guy, Kali practitioner. In the 90s, he went to South Africa and he trained Zulu stick fighting out there. And he actually mentioned that same principle that you were talking about. And it goes back to the idea of feinting, where they were using that rap shot, what they call it an SEA, to kind of like go around the shield and get past the shield. He has a pretty popular video out that kind of covered like a few strategies that he felt that was really good in Zulu stick fighting that he uses in Kali.
Yeah, I remember that one. I saw it recently, and I can definitely link that as well.
And then one thing I also wanted to say concerning Haitian machete, and then just kind of concerning any bladed systems we find like in a diaspora, it's an understandable assumption. Typically, people don't really connect bladed culture with African culture, so usually, like if you see guys that if there's a tradition of stick fighting, it's usually really simple to say, oh, okay, well, Africans, are using sticks, and this is like something that we connect and associate with Africa pretty easily. But like when we're talking about like a weapon system that using an edge weapon, like a short sword or whatever else, it's a little harder for us to kind of see that that's like something that enslaved Africans had brought with them during the slave trade. Many people that were brought over to this part of the world were captured as prisoners of war, and these traditions were brought over with them. So the ideas of full revolts and rebellions were often staged by people that had experience with their indigenous forms, their military, on the other side of the Atlantic. So I just wanted to kind of put out there that even though we don't really associate the sword with African cultures per se, many of these people that were brought these traditions over were trained professionals in their areas, and they brought those skills along with them. And not to say that there isn't any European influence through interaction or adoption or imitation or whatever. It's hard to kind of detangle where it starts and where it stops, but just wanted to kind of put it out there that stuff did exist at that time.
Also, taking into consideration the enormous diversity, it's just so easy to just say Africa, and that doesn't really mean much of anything. Like historical European martial arts encompasses so many different things, and different weapons, different styles, different time periods, this and that and the other. Like you can't really talk about like what is the average European. You can't even say that. So no more than you can say what's the average African. So you have so many different cultures that, of course, influenced each other, that influenced cultures elsewhere on other continents, and were influenced by them, etc. It just, there's so much mutual influence as well. So was there anything else you wanted to point out about the video, or any other things to add or correct? Or
No. I wanted to say, one, I really appreciate you tackling this, because you're right. It opens up dialogue. It opens up a chance for us to learn more. And even as a practitioner in the system, because my job is on one level, I want to be able to practice the art as the tradition is being practiced, and I want to excel within the tradition. The other side of that is I also want to understand like how this applies on the outside of the tradition when having to fight people that are not playing the same game and they're coming from a different perspective. So this kind of dialogue is important for the other half of that understanding. We've been experimenting with more application of some of the skills in Tir Machete in the Avril system, more active beats and more of a broken rhythm as far as trying to get more into the realm of sparring and less in the idea of feeding and trading blows. But we'll be posting some more information about what we discover about how that works and how what's applicable or what we are able to apply at this point in time. My teacher, Professor Mike Dillon, is constantly going to Haiti in the summer. So if anyone is ever interested in taking a summer trip to Haiti to go train with the Avril family, you can contact Mike via YouTube, and he's always taking people out there. I need to check in with him because considering what's been happening over there, I need to make sure that he's okay or the people are okay. Also, just real fast, I left the link here in our discussion, but we're having HAMA is having our second gathering this weekend. If anyone is interested, it's virtual, it's free, and we're going to be showcasing fighting arts from around the continent and the diaspora. So if you guys are able to attend. So if you want to get some more information and insight into fighting arts from the African diaspora, particularly like bladed arts, empty hand, and stick fighting, I recommend you get this book. It's called Fighting for Honor, written by Professor TJ Obi.
I'll link it below in the description.
Awesome. He has laid the foundation for a lot of our understanding of how these arts came into being and how they were expressed and practiced in their native cultures and such. So he's done a lot of field work in Colombia and Brazil, in Haiti and elsewhere. So any of his works, he's written some phenomenal stuff, especially connect Central African warrior traditions with the fighting traditions we have in the African diaspora. So TJ Obi, Fighting for Honor. He's done a number of papers and essays like on the subject. So, and definitely appreciate your time and the chance to kind of actually get to talk to you in person and to, dialogue.
Yes, thank you for coming on. It's definitely appreciated. It's always good to get that direct conversation going as opposed to just monologuing about something, and particularly if it's something that I don't know that much about. It was great to have you on and talk about this. And I hope you folks enjoyed it too. It's definitely a bit more insight and follow-up to that video that should be useful. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.